This episode of the CreaseCast is brought to you by Manscaped. For 20% off and free worldwide shipping, go to manscaped.com and use the code CREASE20. That's CREASE 20 at manscaped.com.
This is the CreaseCast.
Ladies and gentlemen, you're probably recognizing this voice, and it's not the one you've heard over the last couple episodes. Guess who? It's your boy, Big Daddy Fat Cock Cody Sievertson, back on the show, ready to talk about some TDL action and the Canucks' absolute failure of a 7-game homestand. It's your boy. I'm back.
I guess we have to add the explicit tag back, huh?
Well, I figured we're now sponsored by Manscaped, so
That's
we
true.
open with a sponsored ad. Make sure to go support Manscaped. Check us out, guys. Support the podcast by supporting Manscaped. So I felt appropriate to refer to genitalia in my intro for this return episode where we get some good stuff to talk about, because we're going to quickly run through it, because there isn't really much to talk about when it comes to that 7-game homestand, because bottom line is they blew it. They put themselves in a position to actually have a chance at a wild card spot, and just as quickly, or not quickly, but just as soon as they had earned the ability to go for playoffs, they quickly pissed it away with some pathetic performances against the Buffalo Sabres, the Calgary Flames, the Detroit Red Wings. Yeah, the 1-0 shutout loss. Just pathetic gameplay from a team that, I mean, it was Quinn Hughes, I think, that had the quote being like, right after their loss to Tampa, like, I don't think we could lose 2 in a row ever again. And it was right after they had just lost 2 in a row. So it was like, Quinn, buddy, how stoned are you right now?
Like, Quinn, buddy, like you gotta know
Do
you're
your
checking the
research a
fates
little
when you
bit.
say that. Yeah.
Yeah. So obviously the platitudes and the phrases in the media from the players really spoke to a team that was ready to buy in and go on a good run to make playoffs and actually show that they're a team worth keeping together after this season. But then reality set in, and everyone remembered, oh wait, it's the Vancouver Canucks. They're not good. They're not well constructed, and all the flaws that they had during the Travis Green era were on full display during the home game or the homestand. They looked bad. It was embarrassing. Had you over for a nice little Saturday of hockey sessions and pizza, and we got to watch Nashville thoroughly dominate Eric Shalgren and the Toronto Maple Leafs, followed by the embarrassing, borderline unwatchable Vancouver Canucks game.
Yeah. It was
Like straight up
awful.
unwatchable. It was such a bad game.
We were
basically on
barely paying
Twitter,
attention.
like
Yeah.
looking for trade deadline trades at that point, because it was just like, there's nothing happening here. No one's invested. No one's trying to be a difference maker. It was just awful hockey.
Yeah, and I think while I was on the train up to see you guys, I think that was when the Claude Giroux trade dropped, or like the kind of like the confirmation that he was indeed going to Florida. So like that dropped all within that same kind of like that short time span. And yeah, and I got to meet your dog, which is obviously why you have not been here. So it's exciting to have you back, and exciting to have Murph will make his CreaseCast debut at some point.
Well, hopefully not. Hopefully he won't make his CreaseCast debut, because that means he's barking, and that means I need to go from the show. So let's hope he's not making his debut anytime soon. We've got
Norbert's
a short little window
before.
I know, and that almost ruined the show. I almost walked right there. So I would understand if Murphy ruined the show. I would completely understand why you would kick me off. But that's not going to happen today. We're going to be positive. Murphy's going to be down for at least an hour. So we got a little bit to crush through some trade deadline and Canucks talk, because we got some stuff to go through. We're not going to hit up all the trades, because I'm sure anyone listening to this show, they don't want to hear about, future considerations for Frederick Allard.
Now, hold on here.
Or whatever that guy's name was.
Future Considerations has a bright future, and we need to talk about that. Like, he's a really good depth option.
He was moved around quite a bit this offseason. He must have been devastated.
Yeah, he's had a bit of an up and down year for sure, but like I think in the right environment he'll do very well.
He could thrive under the right coach.
Yes.
That's why so many coaches are acquiring him, because they assume they could maybe be the guy that helps him break his slump.
Yeah. Him and his
Damn.
line mate, player to be named later. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's my
Yeah.
favorite guy.
Yeah.
But before we get into the trade deadline talk, I believe we had brought this up when we were eating pizza, watching Detroit thoroughly embarrass the Vancouver Canucks on home ice. Um, that was that game, right? It was Detroit.
Calgary.
It
Calgary.
was Oh yeah, it was
We were at
Calgary
the Calgary game. The 1-0 game was at least
a
entertaining
couple
to
days
me as a
ago.
goaltender. Like, yeah, the other one was just
Oh, okay,
atrocious. Like that was a rough game. I felt bad for Thatcher Demko, who's doing his best,
I
darn it. But
I'm
uh
doing a great job of convincing the fans that they should be listening to what I talk about on this podcast when I can't even remember which
you
game it was 3 days ago or
you
2 days
you
ago.
you have an excuse. You've been out, you've been parenting, you've been on a
All the games
journey.
kind of run together when your schedule is 5 a.m. until 9:30, 10:30 p.m. You
Learn,
kind of
yeah.
forget which games happen when. I know there was a 7-game homestand. I watched every single game. I watched most of the Abbotsford's games too. I finally caught up on preloading all the shot data from AHL.com into my spreadsheet, and oh my god, there are so many periods of hockey that I somehow have to track over the next couple months, and it gives me severe anxiety just thinking about it.
Yeah.
There's so much there, but we're not going to talk about that
No.
because I wanted to bring up something that we did before the season started, before I had a dog, and before remember back when I still had time in my
Back
life.
when back when I was much more sane.
Yes, back when I back when I could think straight and remember which games happened when.
Yes.
Uh, we were talking about our preseason predictions, what we thought the standings were going to be, because I saw it pop up on my Google Sheets feed as like one of the last Excel sheets that I had opened. I was like, "Oh, this should be funny," because I had completely forgot what we'd even picked, and I was just dying because we were so. I mean, we're not terribly off, but we were very optimistic about some play or some teams. Very down on some teams for their summer moves because I believe we made our predictions. Man, I think in the summer, I
Yeah,
think, like,
we made
maybe
them
a
September, I
month.
think,
Yeah,
like,
like,
right before, so, like,
quite a
pretty
bit
close.
before the season had started, and, of course, what happened was there was a ton of action, like, before the season really began, so a lot of stuff really shook out in a way where we were like, "Oh, this is gonna impact our, standings predictions quite a bit,"
Mhm.
but we gotta go through because
Yeah.
the big standout for me from the Pacific Division is we both had Vegas first, which I
Has
mean,
not they're not even in
not
a playoff spot, are
quite
they?
not quite right because I mean, but how could we have predicted they were gonna go all in on Jack Eichel because Jack
That's
Eichel was
right.
going to hold out with a neck injury with Buffalo and end up there? There
Yeah,
were rumors at the time, but we weren't sure that would actually go through. We
we
were
were half kidding when we were joking, like, "Oh, maybe Jack Eichel will become a Knight, and, like, they'll
yeah.
trade everybody to get him," and it's like, then they actually did it and got him
Mhm.
for way significantly less, and you're like, "Oh,
Yes.
oh, never mind," like,
We
yeah,
were both low on Calgary and Los Angeles, and sure enough, those 2 are cemented as the 1 and 2 of the Pacific Division, which
yep.
ruins our entire brackets. We did have it correct though that Anaheim and San Jose would be in bottom 3, and then Vancouver, we both had some aspirations, some positivity in our podcast that they would actually maybe do okay this year, despite the fact that they were banking on OEL and Garland being the saviors to the organization. We did not. No one
Travis
accounted
Green was gonna
for.
put it all together.
We were. We did
Oops.
not bank on the team just continuing their gas leak season and being absolutely atrocious at the
Yeah.
start. Not to the extent that they were.
Yeah. Now, here's the thing though, you have them at 4th, where
Hmm.
and they're right now they're at 5th,
Yeah,
which in theory you could still end up right on that. Like they
I don't
could
think
still finish
so.
4th and miss the playoffs. Like that's still kind of
It's it's
in
still
the
a
possibility.
possibility, but I think they would have to pass.
They'd have
I
to
mean,
pass
that
one
that
of
would
Vegas or
that would
Edmonton.
imply that Vegas or Edmonton are just in pure free fall, but
I
Edmonton's
mean,
on like a 7-game win streak right now.
yeah. Edmonton's
And
doing much better.
yeah, they're
Vegas
doing all
is
right in spite of their goaltending.
yeah.
Vegas is like I
They're
would say they're just like basically doing what Vancouver's doing, where they're just like, we're waffling. We're doing our
yeah.
best to survive here.
They're trying to keep they're trying so desperately
Yeah.
to land the plane,
They're
and it's not looking good.
okay, so you know that Simpsons reference where they refer to the Olympic gymnast who lands and what was later revealed to be a
Yes.
broken ACL, and it's just like, ah, that's exactly
Ouch.
Vegas right now.
Yeah, yeah,
Ouch.
yeah. I
Um,
had them in second place, I had the Canucks in second place, which
you
is
were very optimistic. I
yeah.
was
Oops.
lukewarm. I had them
Which
missing as no, as the fourth because I always believe that the Central is just generally better than the
yes,
Pacific. Like it hasn't been the Pacific's like time for like a long time.
which is the correct call. That's the
Yeah.
correct choice. Yeah.
Central, we were way closer though. I had Colorado, Minnesota, Dallas, Winnipeg, and St. Louis in top five, and being the wild card teams. Winnipeg was the only wrong one because they're just atrocious this year, like
Yeah,
just awful.
they've had a weird year. Like, they haven't been
Hellebuck's having a
particularly
down year, so it's like
yeah,
when
and
he's
that's
down, it's like you can't do anything about it. Even though Kyle Connor's like a 30 goal scorer,
I think
like
Nick
you just
Ehlers has
can't do
still been
anything
really
about it.
good.
Yeah.
Yeah,
But yeah, Nashville, you and I were both really low on, and they just decided like, hey, we ditched Ryan Ellis and bet on Tanner Jeannot, and you and I ripped on them super hard for banking on Tanner Jeannot, and man, taking the L on that one because that guy's been
yeah.
fucking unreal for them.
Nashville
I
is yeah, Nashville's been
I
way
had no
better.
idea, but apparently Tanner Jeannot ranks like 10th or something in forward penalty killing time.
Holy cow. Like,
Yeah,
good
so he's like not only like a rookie with like nearly 30 goals, but he's also been like a huge mainstay on their PK too.
that's
Crazy.
wow. Yeah,
Just like found
that's
money.
rare. Putting rookies on the PK,
Who
you
knew?
never see that here.
Can't
You
believe you
never
could do that.
yeah, you can what do you mean Vasily Podkolzin can play penalty PK time and he actually is well suited for that role? Get out of here
Mhm.
with your
Funny.
logic. Yeah.
So then Atlantic Division, I think you and I, yeah, we have the exact same order. And the
Oh,
only
interesting.
ones we can take the L on is thinking Montreal was going to continue their success after the bubble. You and I were both very lukewarm on Dominique Ducharme because we had said the entire playoff run last year, he is not a good coach. He is just getting phenomenal goaltending out of Carey Price, and that's it.
Mm,
Uh, that
yeah.
ended this
Yeah.
season, unsurprisingly, when Carey Price sat out the year, and sure
Now, did
enough,
we know that at the time? Did we
yes.
know that Shea Weber and Carey Price were both gonna be out and we picked them 4th?
Oh, you know what? I think at the time, I think Carey Price wasn't out yet.
Yeah, I feel like Weber we knew
Weber
already
we knew
because
because it was like
we knew, like
July 6th. They were like, "Oh, by the way, Shea Weber is looking like he's not going to be coming back," and that was like a 2
yeah.
days after the Cup Finals.
I think we even knew it, like, in the day after the cup final almost, or, like, in
Hmm.
the like, when the finals ended because
Yeah.
everybody was talking about how, like, "Hey, everybody hey, they're really, like, patting Shea Weber consoling Shea Weber." It's almost like he knows he's not coming back. So,
Right.
like, there was that one, yeah. So I don't think we knew that Carey Price was gonna be out as long as he was,
Hmm.
because otherwise, yeah, I think we would have both ranked them a lot lower.
Yes, but not
Yeah.
bottom of the division.
Not
Bottom
as
of
bad, no.
division doesn't really matter though because it's Ottawa, Detroit, Buffalo, and we always knew like the one of those three is going to be in the bottom. Didn't matter. Um,
Buffalo's done better than expected, and Detroit as well. Like, I think both of
Detroit
them have done a lot
especially.
better. Yeah, they've
Detroit's done very well, all things considered, playing like basically just a bunch of kids in their forward group, and like they're all lighting it up and being successful. Moritz Seider's been put up like
Lucas
not
Raymond.
co- not not
They
God
probably Calder.
Norris Trophy quality defense levels, but he's looking like one of these Kale McCarr types who's going to be contending for a Norris probably within the first 5 years he's an NHL player, which is like an absolute steal for an organization like them who haven't really had blue line talent in quite some time.
Mhm.
Um, and then the Metro, man, I mean,
Mm,
we didn't really know the New York Islanders were going to go on an 18 game road trip to start the year. I think they knew that there was going to be delays because of the arena construction or whatever, so they weren't going to be at home for quite a bit,
mhm.
but not to the point it would be 18 games into the year or 23 or whatever it was, and then they just lose every single one of them. Um, but other than that, we pretty much got it right, except for
Yeah.
my Philadelphia pick, which is I don't know what the fuck I
You
was
had
thinking there.
Carolina deep in
I did.
the bowels of your division. I had them first.
I had to take a huge L on Carolina because I had zero faith that I wrote them off immediately because of Alex Nedeljkovic being
Being
traded
traded.
to Detroit. I was
Yeah,
like, why would they not
yeah.
re-sign him? It'd be super cheap. What are you banking on? And
Mhm.
then losing Dougie Hamilton, I thought would be a bigger impact into their locker room situation. And I was wrong. Take the L on that one.
Yeah.
And picking Philadelphia for third. I don't really remember why I picked them for third. I think I
I
did it
think
because I had some reason that like AV always like gets to like a cup finals in like his first few years as a new coach because he did it with New York. He did it
I
with
think we just expected Carter Hart to bounce back a little bit more,
that
like,
too,
because he was coming off an awful year, and we were
like
both
a
like, "Oh,
historically
yeah."
bad
Yeah,
level.
and we were both like, "Well, that's not gonna happen again, so he
Mhm.
should be fine." And this year, I don't think like, he's definitely not been as bad, but he still hasn't been the goalie he was the first year.
Yeah.
Yeah,
My
no.
Metro bracket is a complete mess. Yours is much cleaner. We were both wrong on Pittsburgh though. We both were kind of like this is it. Last year was the final year that
Look,
Crosby's going to be the hero. I don't know why we bet against
because
Crosby and Malkin, but we
we
did.
be because we clearly forgot to factor in for Evan Rodriguez,
We
who
did.
to come in and have
The
the season he was.
donks.
Like, how could we? And how could we forget about Evan Rodriguez,
How could
Mark
we?
Donk, and Buzz Flibbit? How could we forget about them?
And now they literally have like obviously I haven't been on the show in a long time, so like we haven't had the opportunity to talk about this, but they've literally got a guy on their team right now named like Mark Friedman or something.
Yeah, yeah,
Like
that's
it's just
right.
like a fake name for a
El
for for a player who's like scoring for
it's
them now.
it's Elliot Friedman just playing ho just, like, secretly going and living a double life as a Penguins player, yeah.
I love that. I mean,
Yeah.
good for him. Good for them for seemingly finding these random dudes to just like show up and produce for them like on like, I don't even know where they find these guys. Like,
They
you
d
it's like
well,
one of those things where, like, you look at their, like, roster, like, after a while, and you're like, "I don't know any of these names. I could not tell you a single person on this roster or how many points they have. I
them
have no
them
idea."
New J n that team for me is New Jersey. Like, I can never like, I'm always like, "I have no clue who half these guys are, but apparently they're decent." And then yeah, and then you mentioned, like, the whole, like, these random depth guys. Maybe now that's gonna be the Canucks because they have the architects who built the Mark Dunk, Buzz Flibbit pipeline. They've got
They
them now, and they're
saved
doing their
money.
thing.
They've acquired 2 players for their system since taking over. They signed Arshdeep Baines out of the Vancouver Giants, and then they also signed a amateur tryout for their on an AHL deal. So like not likely to be like a success. Like this is just like AHL fodder, like AHL depth that you might have in Brandon McManus. He's like a center winger type plug and play forward. He might be nothing, but it's like since being picked up, that's 2 guys out of, overagers, like guys that weren't drafted that they picked up for free. Maybe that's a Friedman for them. Maybe that's a Donk or a Flibbit. You have no idea. But good for them. Overall, they've started to kind of build that pipeline, that old Pittsburgh pipeline of here's a bunch of random guys and
Here's
they're
got
cheap and they're gonna come play and who knows? Maybe
Yep.
there'll be something.
Yep, and now they're starting to work on the pro roster a little bit slowly. They're slowly
Yes.
working on the pro rosters, like with the trade deadline having come and gone today.
Yeah, so let's get right into it. Trade deadline obviously has come and gone. Big day, big weekend, really, because obviously the trade deadline starts a few days before. Canucks, of course, naturally had a back to back on the weekend. And so a lot of people were worried like, well, if they win both games, are they going to be sellers? Are they going to be buyers? Are they going to be sellers? Are they going to do anything at all? And sure enough, they get absolutely embarrassed in the first game, and that seemed to set the chart the direction from the get go. It wasn't even like a question; it was just like, oh no, we're selling. Like,
The
there's no
Calgary
way.
the Calgary game coming on the same day as what was it? The Hampus Lindholm trade.
Hmm.
I
Hmm.
think was like those two were the 2 nails in the coffin. Like those were
Yeah,
very much the case of they're done now. Like
yeah,
clearly there's a high market, right? There's a decent market right now to make a trade.
Mhm.
You are much better off trying to find something on the market, trying to make deals on the market rather than just standing pat and being like, well, there's playoffs afoot. No, no, there isn't.
Yeah,
I would, as much as I'd love to see playoff hockey at Rogers Arena again.
just
This isn't the year. It's not the year.
as Daryl Sutter put it so aptly, yeah, you don't want to face Colorado Avalanche as the 8th seed. It'll be the quickest 8 days of your life and a waste of time. That would be the Vancouver Canucks if they had somehow trended in the direction of being the second wild card spot. They would have been destroyed. It would have been embarrassing. Maybe Thatcher Demko steals you 2 games off like shutout performances when he stops 65 shots. Otherwise, nothing's happening. They were not going to do anything this playoffs. Their team was just not built for it. We don't really have time to get into this, but I think we were talking about this on Saturday when we hung out. Thatcher Demko looks very, very tired
He
and
looks a
looks
little.
very fatigued in that game. He's looked fatigued in several of the games, even Sunday's game, which for some reason they still played him.
Well, yeah, and there was the clip that came on that showed up online of
Hmm.
essentially Yarrow Halak saying
Like, why am I
asking
playing?
why am I playing,
Yeah.
because because it was kind of weird that he was going in favor of Demko, considering Thatcher hadn't wasn't the problem in that game. It was 4-0 and after the second period, but that wasn't
Hmm.
his fault.
Yeah.
He wasn't playing super great, but it's clearly not his fault that they're down in this hole.
There
Um,
there were so
and
many, like, odd man rushes and, like, dangerous scoring chances in, like, the first, like, 5 minutes of the period. It was like, yeah, of course he gave up 4. Like, 2 of them were maybe bad goals, but, like, the odds alone are gonna tell you they're gonna be down goals unless he's playing at an elite above elite, like, caliber, which he just can't do every single night. And I think it was something someone had said prior to this game, he hadn't had a night off since like before January 1st. Like he'd been playing every single game, including the All-Star break.
yeah,
It's insane. Like you
yeah,
can't do that to him.
yeah, you're noticing him make more desperation saves, because he's caught a little bit just a second behind the play.
Yeah.
That's something Demko makes good, will make good desperation saves from time to time. Like we saw it earlier in the year when he did that one with no blocker or no glove
Yeah.
or so. And but generally speaking, he doesn't have to rely on those very often. It's when he makes a big save, often it's because he was in good position and was ready for it and was prepared for it. So when you're seeing him dive a lot more across the crease, falling a little bit, landing a lot more on, say, his stomach and his arms rather than just on his pads, that
Hmm.
tells you that he's having to play a little catch up to the pace of play. And that's a sign of a fatigued goalie. I would say I trust Ian Clark to know when to go to tell the coaching staff hey, it's
Like,
you
hey,
got to not play him.
let's not kill him. Let's not blow his MCL
Yeah.
uh in a losing season. Like he doesn't need to be playing every single game anymore. You
Yeah.
might as well try and rebuild the bridge with Yarrow Halak and just give him starts. Like,
Yeah.
who cares?
Now that the deadline is passed, I think you'll see Dem or Halak play a lot more.
Yeah, hopefully.
I think you'll see him get a lot more opportunities in front of some new faces and some different defensemen.
Start him the last 15 games
Honestly, yeah,
in a
maybe.
row.
Yeah, maybe.
Yeah. You wanted to play, here you go.
Yeah, maybe. Well, again, because we've talked about it before with Halak. He kind of is a goaltender that needs a lot of starts, that needs both,
Yeah.
or at least a decent chunk of them, and gets
Yeah.
better as he goes. So if you're yeah, maybe you look at the last 20 games of the year, and you're like, okay, we're gonna give Halak 10 of these. Why not?
Yeah.
It's
Sure.
not what
You
it
got
can't.
nothing to lose.
It can't change anything about your cap situation. There's nothing about
Mhm.
your playoff standing that's really going to change that much. You are
Yeah.
much better off just giving Halak as many games as he wants in the last little stretch here, and saving Demko for next season when you're really going to need him again.
Yeah, let's not no sense
Um,
running the risk of injury on old Demko. They cannot afford that, especially at a $5 million cap hit. You just can't do it.
Before we get into the Canucks, the trade deadline moves the Canucks did make. Can I read you a tweet I just saw on Twitter?
Absolutely.
Okay, so this is a tweet. This was at 5:57. This is a tweet from Darren Drager, and the quote is, "It's believed part of the delay in processing Dadonov to the Ducks, which, in case anyone didn't know, includes Ryan Kessler's old contract,
Mhm.
included old business. The NHL didn't have Dadonov's original no trade list on record. Turns out Anaheim was on the list, but neither Vegas, Anaheim, nor the NHL knew the trade was processed based on this."
What?
So apparently they just didn't the league
Just
did not have any record of his no trade list somehow. They just didn't have it.
what
And the trade went through anyway.
it but can he void it? Can he
I I don't know.
like,
Because
doesn't he get a say?
well, that's the interesting thing. Vegas didn't know. So Vegas didn't know because whoever
But they
signed
signed
it
the
must have been
deal.
whoever. Well, that's the thing. Did they sign the deal or was it the last team that they got him from? So Ottawa. Did
No,
Ottawa
because they
not
Oh, yeah,
like
that's right, they
did
traded for him, didn't
did
they?
Ottawa not
File the
process
paperwork
that trade
properly.
properly that had a list that had Anaheim on it so he couldn't get traded to Anaheim. So either way, he is now an Anaheim Duck,
Wow,
despite supposed to have a no trade that includes Anaheim on it. That
wow.
is
That
incredible.
is
In case the massive hours delay, it's 6 and trades have been trickling through since what 5 till close to
purely because
5.
they've been trying to sort out why this trade had
That
taken like, that they were
yeah.
probably working on that for the last, 5 hours, like, "This doesn't make any sense."
That and also I'm pretty sure they use the oldest, stupidest system in the world because I think it was Jarmo Kekalainen today was talking about had his press conference at post trade deadline while trade calls were still going on. And he was like, yeah, there's 33 still in the queue.
Yeah,
And it was like,
I know, and it
How
was
are
like,
that many still to go? What is your system here?
"Yeah,
Is it
what are
just
you guys doing?"
yeah, I swear to God, it sounds like there's just one old guy who's just all right, let me put this no move on sticker on
It's
this
like a
player's
it's
card.
like a
It's like,
punch card system from,
yeah,
the early '80s,
yeah,
just
it's like a it
manually typing it in.
yeah, it's just an old punch card system
Oh
or
my god.
something. They're using a computer that does not have internet. It just has code. It's like
Everything's
it,
done by fax. I
yeah,
completely
the
believe
I
that they
com-
would probably run that stuff by fax.
yes, I 100% because they'd be like, this is safer. It's like,
Yeah.
how is this
Is it?
any safer?
Yeah.
like,
Alright.
so I had to bring that up because I
No,
saw
that's
that
good.
and that is the funniest thing I've ever heard.
We'll we'll note that for when we get to our trade deadline winners and losers picks. But for now, let's get into the Canucks trade deadline moves because, folks, they actually did some moves. They did some things, which, depending on where you fall on the pendulum of sell or buy, or playoffs or tank, you might be happy or you might be really miserable and pissed off by this trade deadline. First move, a move that was long time coming and a move that I think caught everyone in Vancouver off guard because there was no inklings that a move like this was going to happen. But that was Travis Hamonic traded to the Ottawa Senators for a third round pick. The Canucks' own third round pick, mind you. A
Yeah.
pick that initially was acquired by the Vegas Golden Knights in exchange for the Nate Schmidt cap dump, which then got flipped to Ottawa in exchange for, guess who? Evgeny
Evgeny
Dadonov
Dadonov.
and that contract that apparently had a no move clause that everyone forgot about.
That
Classic.
so apparently we actually segued very well into this trade. Well done. Support for the CreaseCast is brought to you by Manscaped, who is the best in men's below the waist grooming. Manscaped offers precision engineered tools for your family jewels. Manscaped recently launched the Ultimate Men's Hygiene Bundle, the Performance Package. Join over 4 million men worldwide who trust Manscaped with this exclusive offer for you, CreaseCast listeners. 20% off and free worldwide shipping with the code CREASE20 at manscaped.com. If my math is correct, that's about 8 million balls. I am somebody who is going to school right now for media and broadcast training, and that includes looking your best, particularly up here in the face and shoulder area. But at the end of the day, personal hygiene goes far beyond just that, and Manscaped is really going to help with that. Manscaped's Performance Package 4.0 comes with not only the Lawnmower 4.0 trimmer, their Crop Preserver ball deodorant, Crop Reviver toner, Performance Boxer briefs, and a travel bag to hold your goodies. It also comes with this lovely Weed Whacker ear, hair, and nose trimmer, which is great for things like being on camera. The Weed Whacker is also waterproof and provides proprietary skin-safe technology, which can help reduce nicks, snags, and tugs in those delicate nose holes. It's time to take care of yourself, so go to manscaped.com and get 20% off and free shipping with the code CREASE20. That's CREASE20 for 20% off and free shipping at manscaped.com. Unlock your confidence and always use the right tools for the job with Manscaped.
Indeed, a very good segue and transition, because now we can talk about Travis Hamonic, his saga, his what he meant to the organization. No, we're not going to do that. Get out of here. See ya.
Yeah.
Like, one less Kevin Epp client signed to the Canucks is a great day for Canucks fans. I
And
cannot
Canucks
stand
players,
Kevin Epp.
apparently.
There's too many of them.
Yeah.
And the worst part is the guy with the worst contract that is going to be immovable for years is probably going to be the reason why Kevin Epp continues to be on Vancouver Canucks radio and sports shows for years to come, which is just devastating because he's an asshole. He has the worst opinions, blames fans, blames the media for how his players are treated, not the fact that he signed. I mean, kudos to him. He's a good agent that gets his players paid, but he then also blames the teams that sign these deals for not having better cap responsibility to sign his other players. He's a complete dingus. He had that whole situation with Jake Virtanen. Yeah, I don't have any time for Kevin Epp. So one
Yeah.
less player is great, especially one who held out of the early parts of the season because he refused to get vaccinated properly. He's now convoying over to Ottawa, and he can find some cool things to do in his off time.
Oh,
So good for
boy.
him. This trade
Oh,
to
dear.
me, honestly, makes the Canucks trade deadline like A plus. I mean, it's not an A plus. It's probably like a C plus or like a B minus or something overall. But the fact that they were able to flip this deal of all the deals, like, I thought for sure that no one on their blue line is moving. Myers is immovable. OEL, as said, immovable deal. That thing's a fucking anchor. Travis Hamonic, why would anyone want this guy who's got nothing but issues off the ice? $3 million on his contract, limited no trade clause, an eight team no trade something or other. He's owed like a $1.25 million signing bonus this summer. Like, so you'd have to pay to acquire him at the trade deadline. But God bless Pierre Dorion and Pierre Maguire, who said that's the kind of guy we need in our current window, which is fucking baffling. And it's amazing.
It has been a fascinating little stretch here for the Travis Hamonic saga and everything, because here's the thing, right? Like, hockey, like, as we all know, like, if you've paid a lot of attention to hockey, right? You know, hockey players, for starters, are very careful not to, like, talk bad about anybody, because, like, or even say too much about what they think of another player, whether or not they've agreed or got along. And that's just because, like, as with any business, any industry, there is always this fear of, like, oh, well, you know, if I say bad thing about this guy, that might come back later to bite me in this other case, like in what have you, right? So people are very, like, there's, especially in a sport like with as much like nepotism and as much like in where the culture is so ingrained within a small bubble and ecosystem, that stuff really can come back around to get you later. With Hamonic, what's been interesting is not only have we had multiple reports now that Patrick Allvin, as GM of the Canucks, has won more favors, has won a lot of players over by getting rid of Travis Hamonic because he had worn out his welcome on the team and they wanted nothing to do with him anymore. But also, you had Mark Mathot, who works like in Ottawa Senators, as a Senators analyst now, former senator himself, saying literally, like, I've heard some stories, and I don't know if this is the guy you want in your locker room. So yeah, like a guy who is literally as ingrained in the NHL like system as it comes, a guy who knows player, who knows just as many, like a bunch of players from his own time, is literally telling you, yeah, I don't think this was a good call. I think this guy has character problems. And we're not talking like bullcrap character problems like the ones that players like Akeem Aliu get saddled with. We're talking about actual character issues where guy makes it a little bit about himself and puts himself and his own stuff over the team, but in a way that's unhelpful to anybody. Like there was the thing that JPAT brought up where after he joined the team, after the whole saga went down, he refused to talk to media for the rest of the year. Like he would refuse to do media. And he pointed out that there have been a lot of players like Bo Horvat, obviously, like JT Miller, who have gone out there time and time again, who maybe would have liked to not, when only a certain number of players have to right now. That means other players have to step in and be willing to take their place to do that availability. So whenever you see a player like a Tyler Myers, for example, when he gets in front of him, that's him going, yeah, I'll take this. I'll take answering the tough questions today, whereas Hamonic straight up refused to and would not do it. So you're not going to exactly win yourself a lot of favors in that locker room when you already sat out for a thing because you didn't feel like making a sacrifice that literally every other player on your team made. You're not going to help your matter by refusing to face any sort of tough questions about it or about the season. So yeah, good riddance. Like I wish players the best. And generally speaking, like I'm not a guy who's like, oh, this guy, like you don't hear me often being like, oh, this guy's terrible, the worst person. Like I'll criticize their game, but like generally speaking, I leave the human person out of it. But like in this case, this is a very clear case of like good riddance to bad rubbish, right? Like there's nothing like I'm thrilled they've gotten rid of Travis Hamonic.
Yes, and that move opened up quite a considerable amount of cap space, $3 million, which, hey, I mean, I think the goal that Thomas Strance was pitching that, if the Canucks can open up or find 10 million, like then they're looking pretty good this offseason when it comes to who they need to resign and how you rebuild this team. But what they did was they then flipped the team's lesser third round pick, which was Winnipeg's, which they had also acquired in a trade for Nate Schmidt. They acquire Travis Dermott from the Toronto Maple Leafs, who is a 25-year-old RFA with 1 year left at $1.5 million. Left shot defenseman, but he can play both sides. Big attribute for him is apparently his skating. Hasn't really found a role with Toronto, even though it's quite sheltered, but he might be one of those guys that, maybe Bruce Boudreau of all people can mine something out of him that makes him actually valuable. At 1.5 million, you're not really sweating his deal. You can flip it if you really wanted to next year at 50% retained. That's probably going to get you another asset. So you're not really hurting by what you got there.
And if the last guy had you worried about character issues, this guy, Travis Dermott, has a noted history of being really being involved in the LGBT community and being like part and making like using pride tape quite often because of that, because he has family that's a part of that community as well. So like, yeah, if you're worried about the character thing, here's some proof that you don't have to worry with this one. This one, at least it seems on the surface like you've got a good one here.
Yeah, and I do like that the fact, I mean, just in a vacuum, right? Like if you were identifying these trades like separately, like you're never going to fault the team for at a trade deadline for acquiring a guy that's basically like on a contract you can bury in the minors if he like doesn't work out next year. Like if he's just like if he ends up being the fifth worst left shot defenseman, that's a good sign for the Canucks. It means that they've somehow found some value elsewhere. So you're not really hurting by acquiring this player. You've improved your cap outlook. You apparently get a good quality player. He had a great interview on 650 this morning where he was talking about how, like, he's just grateful to play for the Toronto Maple Leafs as an Ontario-born kid. Vancouver has always been one of the teams that he's always followed. Happy to come here. Apparently, he's coming with 2 dogs and his girlfriend. So we've got more dogs for the dog races, which is good because they need to replace Tyler Motte's puppy. So it all kind of works out, really.
Yeah. It was, and that trade, like, I've watched Dermott for a few years now, and the Leafs have been in kind of an interesting spot with their defense. Like, their defense is never like it's strong, their strongest link. I think everybody knows that. Like, that's no secret. But they've also had some pretty decent guys kind of come out of like the depth pool. Like, I think Andreas Janssen was one of those guys who's now a Devil, like
Mhm.
who is labeled as like a really good as a really good, like, decent defense, like, depth defenseman, never like a top guy. And the Leafs have had these guys waiting in the wings like Rasmus Sandin and Timothy Liljegren, who are supposed to be like their next big things on the blue line. They haven't gotten there yet. They're kind of they're developing very slowly. So it's interesting that the Leafs chose to make this trade. We eventually found out why, and it was because they were getting Mark Giordano, which is an interesting choice, and we might talk about that later. But overall, like, the Canucks are getting a defenseman who very like, whether or not he's struggled to stay in a Leafs team that's winning a lot of games, like, even on a defense that's not necessarily the best, the Canucks are in a spot now where their left side, if you choose to leave him on that natural side, is
Mhm.
looking okay. You're looking kind of like comfortable on that depth side. Obviously, the right still has all of the issues,
It
but
certainly does.
but now you're looking at a scenario, and you and I were talking about the idea. We are talking yesterday. We were like discussing, like, maybe there's one, if we wondered if maybe there would be a trade coming down the line of, like, maybe somehow Patrick Alvin was going to offload OEL or offload Tyler Myers or something. Myers being the one probably the most interesting out of that bunch, simply because there were teams that we knew were interested in him at the time. But even without that, let's say OEL still there, but maybe you shuffle him over to that right side at some point, because I think he has been known to play on the right from time to
Mhm.
time. You're looking at a left side that has Quinn Hughes, Jack Rathbone, and now Travis Dermott, and that's a decent looking side. Like, Travis Dermott is a guy who's probably his ceiling is on a, if you're lucky, I think is a second pairing guy. But, like, that's not what they really need. What they really need are depth guys right now. Like, they really need depth guys who can come in and be a stable third pair, so that Quinn Hughes doesn't have to play 30 minutes a night. You and Dermott supposedly is a guy who can provide that for you, and who can actually be part of that in the long term. And younger, has more controllable years to get I believe he's an RFA at the end of this contract, unless I'm
Yes.
mistaken. So
Correct.
you've got time to work with this guy, and suddenly a part of the Canucks prospect pool that was looking a little bit that was definitely looking the shallowest, I would say, out of all of the groups. Like, he's a little bit older, but
Mhm.
yeah, he's a developing guy that could
He's
end up being a really nice piece for you.
he's in that tweener stage where, like, he either takes another step with the new team or he doesn't, but you're not hurting if he doesn't, and you're okay if he does. Like, it's great. It's a buy low kind of move. Like, he wasn't fitting or moving up in Toronto's lineup, and obviously the Canucks are a worse team, so chances are he's going to, improve a bit. So, we'll see what happens there, but obviously we need to get into the big move, the most
The-
depressing move.
yep.
Pour one out for the broadcast. Say goodbye to Mott Girl Summer because Tyler Mott was traded for a fourth round pick to the New York Rangers.
I
Now
I'm afraid it's Mott coming back.
it is oh
I'm
that
s- I'm
is that is just the worst thing.
I'm d look, it could have been look, J-Pat, I love you, but he did what was it today? That he said it's Mott a lot for Mott a lot. I was like, "No, J-Pat, it's supposed to be it's not a Mott for Tyler." Like, that's how you did the wrong
Yeah,
pun.
you
That's
did
the
the wrong
wrong pun
pun.
there. Like,
The wrong dad pun. Come
B
on.
minus, it could have been an A plus, but that's
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah, this one obviously stung a bit for a lot of fans who were either hoping that Tyler Motte would be re-signed to some kind of affordable deal, or to those hoping that he was going to somehow fetch a second round pick on the trade market. If you looked at like some of the players that were being flipped around at this trade deadline, like a fourth round pick is pretty in line with what he brings to the table. Like,
Yeah.
he's a very solid penalty killer, but at 5v5, like he's only seen an uptick in production this season in his contract year. So if you're trading for him, you can't exactly rely on the fact that he's going to come in and somehow give you how many games are left? 18 games, 20 games left in the season.
Yeah.
You're not exactly banking on him coming in and somehow putting up 10 points in the final 20 games. Like, that's just not who he is.
Yeah. I
Uh,
I wanted to ask you about your immediate reaction to that trade, because for me, it took it took seeing the other trades come through for me to properly go, okay, this is just what the market was. My initial thought was, oh, that's not enough for what he brings. So I wanted to know, like, when you just saw the part that said Tyler Mott for a fourth, what was your immediate thought in that moment?
My immediate reaction was, "Oh, good, they got something for him. They must that must mean whatever contracts they were trying to get him to sign were either too low for him or didn't have the term he wanted." So in my mind, I was like as soon as you see that he's been traded, the return doesn't even matter at that point because all it tells you is they could not come to a new deal. And if the
Yeah.
new deal was too pricey for this new regime, or they said, "Hey, look, we just cleared $1.5 million in cap space, and we're not gonna immediately lock it up with a fourth liner." Like, you just don't do that. Like, I'm completely fine with the move. It makes sense. Sure, you'd want a bit more, but I'd rather them get something than nothing.
Yes.
And this kind of this move kind of tells me one thing, which is that the Canucks current brass are trying to undo all the damage done by the deals like Jay Beagles or Antoine Roussels or Brandon Sutters. They're
Or
basically resetting the floor, right? Because
yes.
the floor before was if you have these intangibles and you come in and like you've got playoff experience or you're 30 years old or 20 years old, we're going to give you 3 to 4 years at 3 million minimum, and they still went with that with Tanner Pearson, who's a fine player, but
And
in
has
their current
outperformed
window,
that, arguably outperformed the money that he's making. Like, has actually done okay considering.
he's done okay. But for where the team was at, I understand
It was still a
they
weird
signed
choice.
that deal. I mean, it hurts more because like I don't want to recycle over the stuff we've already talked about, but Jim Benning came out after the fact and said, "Well, Tanner's agent told me this is how much he could get on the open market, so we signed
Ugh,
him to that," which is just like,
baffling.
you fucking moron. How could you possibly say this out loud, even if it wasn't true? Like, you're an idiot. And
Yeah.
so, in my mind, the regime as it stands with Rutherford and Alvin, they're clearly being like, look, the floor was too high before. You're gonna come in on league minimum deals on our fourth line, and you're gonna earn your stripes. That was the entire Pittsburgh MO. They rarely sign guys to giant deals, and when they did, they usually flipped them if they were underperforming. Tanner Pearson, I think it was Demoulin who was the other one, or Carl
Ryan
Hagelin. I can't
Dumoulin,
remember.
yeah.
So it was like they they kind of I don't want to say they've learned their lessons because obviously they've only made like 5 moves as the spearheading
Yeah.
team on this organization, but it indicates to me that they're obviously looking at their fourth line, their bottom six, and going, you need to be outperforming your contract at all times to stick in this organization. And if you're expiring, you're either going to resign for an affordable deal that works for us, not for you, but for us, or we're going to move on from you. And Tyler
Yeah.
Mott is the first domino in that sense. Who knows what they do with Lamico or Highmore or Chiasson moving forward? I can't imagine either of them or any of them are
That
getting re-signed.
I might, here's the thing. I might like and this in a way this is almost a conversation for like a later show, but I will say I think out of that group, I wouldn't be surprised if Yuho Lamico got an extension, got a new contract after this. Now, actually what's interesting about that though is you and I talked about this the other day, and we both said I think we both agree that it depends entirely on how he does without
Without
Tyler Mott.
Tyler Mott, yeah,
If
because if
he keeps at that pace, yeah, give him
mhm,
another go. But if it's clear that, oh, actually he was doing this well because Tyler Mott was the center on that group, that's gonna be a tough pill to swallow.
yeah,
With Mott, I look at like, yeah, I think in the immediate for me, like I mentioned before, like it was a case of like, oh, I felt like it wasn't enough. I will say this, like even with the amount of with the hours of time that I've had to like process this trade now, I would still say, like, for me, I would have liked to have seen them instead of getting a fourth rounder. I would have
Mhm.
liked to have seen a prospect who's already in the AHL, even if it's not necessarily like I think the name that people were like, oh, is he going to go for Kravtsov or whatever? Like, which was not, I don't think was going to happen, which was never going to happen.
Yeah.
I even if it was just like another kind of lottery ticket guy for Abbotsford, I kind of would have liked to have seen that just because of the fact being that you're still on kind of a shortened timeline, and whoever you pick with this fourth rounder, which I believe is a 2023 fourth round
Mhm.
pick, unless I'm mistaken, is not going to help you for at least another 4 years.
Yeah,
So
fair.
by which point, so I think that's my one critique on that trade is I would have liked to have seen it for a guy who's already in the Rangers system rather than a draft pick. But even then, I was very much basing a lot of how I feel on this organization, how I feel about this management team going forward on what they did with Tyler Mott. And I was very much on the mindset of like, as much as I love Tyler Mott, he's a great person. He's a very good hockey player for what his role is.
Mhm.
I didn't think they should re-sign him for the same all the reasons you mentioned. Like
Yeah.
the fact that they just need to set this precedent of, hey, we're not just going to pay you a bunch of money because you've been around a while or because you're a name brand.
Mhm.
We're going to save that for when we need it. And like in particular, like you look at the fact that Brock Besser did not get moved today. That's that money that they didn't spend on Tyler Mott today is going to come very in whole lot in handy when you're making
Yes.
that just when you're signing Brock to his big extension coming up.
If
When
that is the plan still.
if that is, I mean, I would be stunned if it wasn't. Like, I would
Yeah.
like, why would you trade Brock Besser? That's a very silly thing to do. Um,
Yes.
but overall with Mott, like, I agree with you on the sense of like, I wanted to see them make the move move Tyler Mott, even if it wasn't for a lot. I think they're like, and you've seen the Canucks sometimes cave to like a little bit, like in the past, to like deals that maybe didn't make a lot of sense for them or what
Mhm.
have you, and just took what was out there. But that was also predicated on a lot of cases where sometimes there would be a move that they should really make, even if it wasn't going to be a slam dunk home run winner,
Right.
and then they didn't. And then you end up with quotes like "we ran out of time" or "the market wasn't there."
Love those
Like,
quotes.
yeah, love those quotes. Like a player like Tyler Mott should be a commodity, and maybe like there was a question that came up today from a lot of people I noticed where they were like, maybe we are valuing Tyler Mott too high because of how much we love Tyler Mott as a human being and as a hockey player, and
Which
the
is
Mott Girl Summer aspect, which is like made him a fan favorite. Like that's the
which
kind of
is
stuff.
completely fair. Like I get it. Like he's got a wonderful story. He's been open about his mental health issues. Like you can't like I
All
understand why people want to root for a player like that to get paid by the organization and to stick around. Like I totally understand why fans would like latch on and be like, this is someone, that should be with the organization moving forward. Like he's given an effort and held up that third or that fourth line for the past 3 years, basically, even though he's been stuck doing it with Jay Beagle or Louis Erickson or Antoine Roussel. Like he's been a soldier, as they say. But
and a
at a
good
certain
playoff
point,
performer in that in the then a good playoff performer in the one chance he got at it.
yeah,
He scored like crazy against the
yeah, he had
Blues. He
what,
went off.
5 goals or something like
Like he
that.
had like 5 goals and like literally if it wasn't for Ryan Reeves literally trying to like decapitate him in game 7, like who knows? Like yeah, like he did a lot of wonderful things for the Canucks. Like he was especially like he was everything the Canucks wanted a fourth line guy to be when they
Well,
got Tyler Mott was what the original Canucks management expected Jay Beagle to be. He was what they expected
yeah,
Brandon Sutter to be to a degree. It was one of those things where Tyler Mott was a perfect fit for the role that he had and a rare one on that depth chart. And it sucks that he's gone, but at the same time, I think that at the end of the day, that's a move that they're not going to look back on with I think a lot of regret. I think they're going to look back on that as that was the right decision to make. It was a tough one, but we got a pick out of it, and that's going to help us down the road, especially when this team has given up draft picks like candy over the past few years.
yeah. Like at the end of the day, like if you're acquiring picks, like whatever, even if they're low, like I mean, at least it shows that you have an eye for the future and you're considering the fact that like you're not going to be good. Like doesn't matter if you re-sign him, if you're still going to be bad with him on any deal, then you're better off trying to get younger And if you can't get the young prospect that maybe you were asking New York for, then you'll take whatever pick you can get. And it's better to get that than absolutely nothing, especially when you can quickly upgrade, or not upgrade, but you can quickly replace a player like Tyler Motte with none other than the other and final trade deadline maneuver of the Vancouver Canucks, which was bringing back Richie himself, Richie the Kid, Brad Richardson. Guy never
B-Rad.
should have left. B-Rad up in this bitch. He like
I did not see this coming. I don't think anyone. I mean,
nobody
no
did.
one saw this coming from. And like, first of all, finally, the Canucks get to take a player from the Flames after they've taken so many of ours.
Our guy, as they would say, right?
Our guy. Did you see the one, the mock-up of him in Canucks jersey? Maybe I'll pull that up on our
Even though
video
he's been
feed
in
if
one
I can find
before,
it.
but
Yeah,
they edited it to make it look like it's a
uh,
Photoshop over the the Flames jersey.
So no, so what they no, I'll show it to you as I find it here, but it was a very,
Yeah.
very funny it was a very, very funny fake jersey Photoshop. But like yeah, Brad Richardson, like you as soon as that happened, like that was prior to the Mott thing, and I think you and I were both like, oh, so like well you I think more so I think you mentioned Dickinson. You thought it might be
I
Jason
thought it would be
Dickinson
him, yeah.
going one or the other. It kind of was like a well, they're probably prepping to trade somebody, and that person is going to take over.
Yeah.
And Brad Richardson's going to take over for whoever it is. There was also the fact of I believe there was something along the lines of Patrick Johnson was saying that because they've done this because they've made this move they can now send some guys like Nick Patan and I think Rempal paper them back down to Abbotsford for the Calder Cup playoffs, which are coming up. I think
Gotcha.
that was also why the Brad Richardson move was made for specific reasons. But overall, it is very interesting to see him coming back. He's coming back in weirdly a very similar spot. like when did he sign with the Canucks? I forget, was that a Gillis
uh
acquisition? Was that one of Gillis's last deals or was that one of Jim Benning's first ones? I
I feel
believe
like
it
that
was
was one of
Benning's first. I think.
yeah, because you got him from LA, didn't he?
Yes, he came as a UFA from LA.
You know what?
Um,
I'm pretty sure that was uh a Gillis thing.
it might have
I
been
think.
like Gillis's last move, like under the torts here. So this is the mock-up. So for anyone not seeing it, this is from at C Bennett _12. They
That's pretty
literally
good.
just took a picture of Brandon Richardson the last time he was in a Canucks uniform, crossed out the Vancouver arch over it in white,
I
and
love
then
that.
put a picture and then put JT Miller's face written over. Oh well, this might be the clue in Ryan. I think that's Ryan Kessler. If I'm or is that a 17 I'm seeing on
Could
on
be.
that jersey? Either way, that's there you go. That's
We
that
love to
was
see it.
it was very funny.
That's
Um,
good.
it was really good. Yeah. So overall, like looking at the Canucks now versus what they were say like a day or two ago. Obviously, it doesn't change much from a playoff standpoint. It doesn't change anything. It doesn't really change anything from that standpoint. Really, like again, they could kind of just keep chugging along if they want to. Here, they didn't move enough pieces to really make a huge dent. Obviously, JT Miller's still here.
Mhm.
Obviously, like Yarrow Halak, who we talked about already. He did not move at the deadline. Myers, they're
No.
all Connor Garland. There was thoughts of that coming up. I saw one person try and make a fake trade that like where it was like
Yeah. Just so
Garland
plainly obviously
for
fake.
Jake DeBrusk. It's like okay, you got to make it at least somewhat believable. Like, come
Yeah.
on, no
You
one's
gotta
falling for
you gotta
that.
try a bit harder than that. Like, come on,
Yeah.
dudes.
Oh yeah. Overall, like, where do you how do you feel about the Canucks now versus a couple days before the deadline?
I mean, obviously, there's still like tons of work. I think they may have missed the boat on being able to capitalize as much as possible on JT Miller's value, which I think might hurt them down the road because he has no extensive, or I guess they have no, like some teams don't have incentives to acquire a player that might be still a point per game even better. Like if he keeps improving, right? Like say to next year he's just as good as he's been the last 20 games. It could be a situation where no teams want to touch him, and then you have an UFA that you cannot get rid of, or you have to retain, and his value dips. Like it's kind of a bummer. It could be bad news bears for them, but other than that, like there was a lot of moves that like you would have liked to have seen, but like there's just no way they were going to happen. Like no team was going to take on Myers, no team's taking on OEL's contract. Jason Dickinson's injured right now, so you couldn't move him. Like there was just a lot of things that you would have liked to have seen happen, but you just knew they couldn't. Um, and obviously, you can't really read into anything either because maybe they did want to move Garland, maybe they did want to move Besser, but they just couldn't because the prices were too low, which I can't fault them for. Like I can't fault them for the moves they didn't make. I think the moves they did make were good, but looking
Yeah.
ahead, I think they might be in trouble with extracting value out of what they're left with this summer.
Yeah, like I think I think the key difference here, prior to before we were talking about with Motte, like where you just have to get a deal, you just have to trade it even if the value's there. The difference in those other cases is all of those guys have term, so you're not under any like real legitimate. You're not under an actual like count timer to make a move or lose them forever for nothing kind of thing,
Mhm.
right? So those are the cases where, yeah, it is in your best interest to, if the market is not at the price that you believe it is, especially with great players like Miller, then yeah, you don't make that move. That's the kind of move that you don't just go fine, we'll take whatever kind of thing.
Yeah.
And yeah, overall, I think the Canucks I don't think it won't affect the team too much. I think the fact that they're getting in Travis Dermott is gonna help the defense a little bit. It might help Thatcher Demko and Yarholak's job just a little bit, which is
Maybe.
nice to see. I mean, we had Patrick Alvin, I believe, talking earlier today about how he expects to see Jack Rathbone and Will Lockwood, interestingly,
That was a bit
as
interesting,
guys
yeah.
competing for a spot down the line here. And I think overall, like, yeah, not too bad a job of what with the moves they made. None of the moves they made were poor ones. And none of them, and they didn't make a panic decision on players that they didn't need to. So overall, like, does it blow you away? No. Is it a perfectly normal trade deadline for a team that's at where they're at? Yeah. Yeah. This is
That
about where you expect them to be.
that's the thing is I think a lot of this trade deadline reaction purely comes down to a lot of people trying to shake off the Stockholm syndrome of the Benning era. Like a lot of people are like, "Oh, this is more of the same from the last regime. They're getting nothing this deadline." Like that is a ridiculous take.
Yeah.
Like
This
I can't remember who it was. I think it was Malcolm ERT. Like really nice guy. Usually has pretty bang on takes, but I don't think he's so off base and wrong when it comes to his takes on the trade deadline for the Canucks. Like he was equating the Canucks acquiring a third for Hamonic and flipping it for Travis Dermott. That's the same thing as flipping or the old regime when they would take a second and flip it for Berchi or Lyndon Vay or for Brandon Sutter. It's like that is so not what this is at all because
no.
those were overpays for unproven assets. This is literally this is a buy low
You've cut
and
salary.
and you've cut salary. Whereas
Yeah.
the others were you're taking a pick, a really good value pick, and flipping it for low value, and usually signing the whatever you got to extensions they did not deserve. In the case of Brandon Sutter, like just not the same. I understand people's like apprehensions and worries that, ownership is meddling or still has a say and is controlling what this team does, but I think people need like I'm the most defeatist person like on the fucking planet. And if I'm telling you you guys need to like simmer down a bit, like have a little faith in the process, it's still so early. Like the
God, yeah.
work that they did, like the work alone of trading Hamonic unretained for a third
Wild.
is like that automatically means you've won the trade deadline because
I
that's a deal no one expected to be moved.
God, no. I thought we were going to be stuck with Travis Hamonic for the rest of that contract. And
He
like,
was he was on waivers earlier this year.
yeah,
Like that's
he
why
was
everyone's
literally,
like, "There's no way no one's going to trade for a guy you can get for free,"
and you
and someone
got him.
did.
And you got him. Like,
Yeah.
and you got him from Ottawa. Like, it is just, it is fascinating. And like, yeah, I made the meme of like, oh, draft pick comes in, they just chuck it away. Like the second they get any extra picks kind of thing. Cause everybody was parading around for the pick itself. And then when they they actually didn't, sorry, I should clarify. They didn't trade their own pick that they got back
Mhm.
to the Leafs for Dermott. They traded the other pick third rounder
They
that they
traded
had, which I believe
Winnipeg's, which would arguably be a lesser pick because Winnipeg has a better points percentage right now. So the chances of Winnipeg being higher in the playoff or the draft order, or
is
sorry,
quite likely.
lower in the
Yes,
draft
higher.
order
Yeah,
or
not
higher,
lower.
whatever.
I see what you're saying. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
having Winnipeg would have a
The
worse
Canucks have the
pick.
better pick. That's what
Yes,
we're saying.
exactly.
Yes.
That's what we're saying.
Yeah. And at the
Um,
and like yeah, but at the end and like whenever we joked about that, that was in like even after that, like I added in the preface of I made the joke, but it's a good trade. Like because it was very much like the problem with the old regime wasn't that they would give a pick away. Like the Nate Schmidt deal didn't work out, but it wasn't because that trade was bad. It just wasn't a good fit. Like that was a
yeah,
decent getting Nate Schmidt for a second rounder was a very good bet to make, even if
and
it didn't work out.
and the
Um,
fact that they flipped like a $6 million defenseman for the exact same pick that they gave away was like a wash. They
yeah,
dodged a bullet basically because they
yeah,
could have been on the hook for a 50% retention, but fortunately Winnipeg was like, no, 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 we'll take him. That's fine.
yeah, yeah, and he's done okay, and he's done pretty well in Winnipeg. Like it's yeah, there is it's different. Those are different than say when you send 3 picks and package them up with a prospect or another player or roster player to get say I don't know Oliver Ekman Larson for and because you're all in on a playoff push. Like that's a different kind of deal.
Yeah.
This is a kind of a case where, yeah, they cut salary, which is the most important thing that they needed to do at this trade deadline. And but they still acquired a player to not only replace Travis Hamonic with, that guy is also cheaper and has lots more like
You have more
control and
control at
yeah,
a
it's a
younger age. So
yeah, oh,
you have to like that.
yeah,
And be
overall,
foolish not to. Yeah.
yeah, overall I'd give him like a B plus. Like
B
it wasn't
plus.
yeah.
I'd probably be in the same range. B minus, B plus, doesn't matter. It's not an A because it's like there's a whole lot of potential that was probably lost, and they might have lost value by not making the deals that they
Yeah,
should have probably been trying to do this entire time. Like
yeah,
I don't think they were, but I'd like to hope that they really weren't banking on them making it to playoffs. Like I'd like to think they made up their mind a long time ago about what they needed to do with the direction of the club and weren't literally waiting until the midnight hour to start figuring out who to
yeah,
get rid of and how.
yeah.
Like,
They
really hope
knew
that wasn't the case.
Yeah, they knew ahead of time what they were doing. Like they had there was pretty clear like when you heard from like insiders talking about how the Canucks are gathering all the information, they've kind of figured out exactly where they need to go in particular directions to make this work.
Yeah.
So you knew they were kind of coming in with it. Before we get into our trade deadline winners and losers here, I do have an update on the Dadanoff
On the
thing.
dad nothing, hell yeah.
Yes. So the Golden Knights tweeted about
We
20
didn't do
minutes
anything
ago,
wrong.
we have become aware of an issue with respect to the trade. We have been consulting with the league office. We will provide further information once it becomes available. And then Frank Saravelli, my coworker over at the Nation Network, he tweeted this Dadanoff trade is a critical transaction for the Golden Knights for salary cap reasons. So it needs to get done. So in other
Fuck.
words, it's not completely gone through. They might they might be stuck with him and you can and
How
all of a
awkward.
sudden yeah, awkward for so many reasons. Number 1, you didn't have his contract you didn't have his contract properly filed and hey, maybe that's the fault of the previous team, but
Yeah.
at the same time, like there has to be meetings with like management where Dadanoff is like, well, I have this 10 trade, this 10 team no move or like his agent or whatever and they're like and they're like what is he talking about? And
That
they don't think they're like, cool. I don't know, sense. Surely you must be talking about some unrelated thing. Like,
yeah, how does that
how
get
does that
missed?
never come up? How long
Yeah,
has he been there? 2
that's
years?
absolutely
1 year?
baffling.
How has that never come up from management or his agent? How have they not been like, well, he has this no move clause? Like that is wild to me.
Yeah, that's
It's a failure on a
especially
lot of
since
people, except
especially
the Ducks.
since Vegas and Anaheim both play tonight, so it's like you should have had this like, figured
They're
out
they're
ASAP.
playing right now. The Knights are playing right now as we speak. Like,
Yeah.
he's
Like,
probably
do they
not.
get
I assume he's not in the lineup, but
yeah,
like,
so, like, what happens if they're like, "Oh, the trade is not approved," now you're like, what happens now? Because they'll be like not cap compliant? What if this is a cap compliancy move and then they're like, oh, it's void. You're over the
That's a
cap, so you're like, how do you penalize a team
that's a
when it's not
great
really their fault? Like if it is Ottawa's fault for not filing the contract properly, how do you punish the team for not
that's a
being cap compliant?
That's a really good question because okay, so the only group that we know, like we know for sure Anaheim's blameless. Like there's nothing. Obviously, it's
Yeah,
not.
they made the
Anaheim is
trade. They
not.
said, yeah, sure, we'll take him.
Yeah, Anaheim. It's Anaheim is not gonna know what his what his contract, his full contract situation is. It is more because they have not been talking to him and his agent this whole time, right?
Yeah.
About it. So they don't have any. There's nothing they can do. The question becomes, well, it's a little bit it's almost a failure on everybody here because clearly this who knows if maybe the Senators did file it correctly and the league just literally lost the paperwork because and yeah, what do you do? Like what do you do? Because if you're the league, if it turns out that oh, this is the league's screwing up, which it very well could be, how do you go and say, well, we're going to punish you because we messed up?
Mhm.
Because we messed up on this paperwork and now you're not cap compliant because of that. I wonder if part of you maybe the league might honestly look at them and be like, well, maybe that's your fault for being too close to the cap in the first place and try and
Yeah.
make this their problem. But at the same time, it's hard for me to find Vegas blameless here because how the hell does that not come up at any point when you're talking about his contract with
No shit.
with the agent and everything? How is that never once? How have they
It
never
would have
mentioned?
had to have come up when he was traded from Ottawa to Vegas in the first place, because Ottawa
Yeah,
signed the deal, so it's like, if it wasn't filed properly, then, like, I don't
because that would
know.
it would have to have been the original. I assume that I have to imagine that meant the original contract was not filed properly. What because so whoever signed that contract, which again we're pretty sure was Ottawa.
It's Ottawa, I'm looking at it. So, yeah,
Yeah,
they definitely signed it, they didn't file it properly, so that means, like, Ottawa would have to be on the hook for not filing it, but they knowing the NHL, what they'll do is they'll be like, "Well, it wasn't filed, that's not our fault, the player didn't, flag it with us, so and because he's been traded since, we're gonna call the no trade clause void, and the trade's been approved." Like, that's
now
probably what's gonna happen.
Now here's what's interesting. His contract on the web on Cap Friendly does say modified no trade on it.
Mhm.
Was that added in the last 10
It's
minutes
probably been
when
added in the last 5 minutes.
I would be interested to know if the Wayback Machine if a Wayback Machine has the file to see, oh, was this actually there the whole time? Because that would be very interesting. If
Yeah.
we went back to yesterday, that modified no trade was totally there the whole time and literally everyone knew that it was there and then just didn't ask questions. That's fascinating to me. Again, well, because they have to submit it. They have to submit the 10-team no trade for it to be on there. So they have to have asked for it at some point. I'm figuring this out. We're figuring this out in real time. I'm sure this doesn't make
Yeah,
for the
but
most interesting podcast, so we'll get off of it
yeah, we're
here.
gonna get
But
off of this because I don't have that much time, and we're gonna actually talk
yeah,
about things that
they
actually
had to
matter.
submit the 10-team no trade at some point. So
Well,
how did they
they
not
didn't.
know it was there? Whose fault is this? This is gonna be a very interesting 24 hours for the NHL in the worst way possible for them.
It'll just be more cap circumvention talk, so that'll be fun to listen to for a millionth time this year. I'm a bit
As
done
a
with it.
as Canucks people who've had to sit with the Canucks sitting on a $3 million Luongo cap recapture bull crap, God,
Yeah.
that's gonna be very interesting.
Yeah. But anyways, let's quickly wrap up here and let's pick some trade deadline winners and losers. I guess we'll pick one winner each, one loser each, and then we'll close up here. So I'll start because my big winner. I mean, I guess it really depends on how this trade with Vegas goes. But my biggest winner of the day was actually the Anaheim Ducks because they came out of this with a fucking haul. One first, 5 second rounders, a third, Drew Hellison, Urho Vakanainen, and Callie Klang, who's a 21-year-old goaltender prospect who's playing for Niels
What
Hoglander's
a
old club, Rögle BK.
That is a great goalie name, can I just
Callie
say?
Klang,
Kelly
hell yeah.
Klang, spelled
The
literally
alliteration,
Clang. Yeah, that's
yeah, stamp.
fantastic. The clang puck clangs off the post. That's awesome.
Yeah,
That's great goal. That's great name. Yeah. I think
for
the Ducks win. I think you're right. The Ducks win even with the Dadonov thing. Out the with
even like because I think the Dadonov deal was like it's Dadonov and like a fourth rounder or something or
yeah, it's a
third.
cap dump.
Yeah, for John Moore and Kessler's contract. So it's like even
Oh,
if it
that's
doesn't
right.
go through, they nothing
They
really
walk away
changes on
fine.
their end. Yeah, they still
Yeah.
have those guys on LTIR. It doesn't really make a difference. But yeah, ton of picks, three very young assets that are going to help them probably in the next 2 to 3 years. Like that's, I mean, and the thing is, Anaheim was pretty much poised to be like a playoff contender. I don't know, maybe like 2 3 weeks ago. And even though they were, Pat Verbeek came out and was like, "Yep, we're selling everything. We're gonna trade away all our expiring UFAs. We're going to cash in while we still can and look to the future." And holy shit, did he ever! So
Yeah.
Anaheim's definitely one of my winners. What about you?
And I think so, yeah, Anaheim was definitely up there. I think you could put the Rangers almost in that category as well. I would say though the real winners here are the team that maybe needed it the most for where they're going. And that's the Colorado Avalanche. Like they got Arturi Lehkonen from the Canadians, which is a huge get for their depth. Like for a team that was already had plenty of depth scoring, plenty of like great players at every position basically. They somehow got even better with like while giving up like they gave up some items. Like they gave up Justin Barron, who's like a defensive prospect, but like that's not even their best one. They still have Bowen Byram. Like
Mm,
they gave up very little to really solidify their like a President's Trophy winning team into something better. I really think that they did a very good job based on that. Cuz like yeah, it's hard for me to look at them right now. The Andrew Cogliano one's a little interesting, but even then but outside of that like Nico Sturm, they get Nico Sturm out of it. They get Josh Manson to like shore up their defense. That came in yesterday. Like they've done a very good job. Like kind of
and they'd managed to do it all without being like over the cap. Like all they had was Landeskog on LTIR, and that's opened up enough space for them to basically make all of these moves. Like
yeah.
nifty little tiny piece of business, as they say.
Yes. The other team that I would throw in kind of into a winners like as like kind of as winners is Florida.
Oh,
Because
really?
well, yeah, because okay, Claude Giroux for the Panthers is huge. Like here's the thing, right? Like unlike while they're second in the league, let's be honest here. The only thing the Florida Panthers have to do this year to make it a successful year is win a damn playoff series because they have not done that since 1996. So they don't need to win the cup this year, but they now have Claude Giroux who's had a like a resurgent year on a team that was already super stacked. Like as
Contract years. It's funny how that works when players show up, eh?
yeah, like God, he's gonna do be a huge get for them. Like Frank, they lose Frank for Toronto, which is kind of a tough one. Ben Sherratt's a little bit like of an interesting wild card there, but like where their defense was at overall, he kind of just needs to be kind of an additional piece. It's not like in Montreal where he was like what playing top pairing. He doesn't need to do that in
Sure.
Florida, I don't think. So, like, I think overall, like, that's why I wouldn't put them in the winners bracket per se, but like the Claude Giroux trade alone is very big for Florida, and I'm excited to see Florida get like some actual star power over
Fair
there to
enough.
go with the ones they already had with Barkov and Huberto.
Interestingly enough, so
Oh,
I actually had Florida in one of my trade deadline losers because I found that they were the biggest overpayers at the deadline.
interesting. Okay.
Because obviously, like they gave up Owen Tippett, who I think is probably going to be like a second line center for a for like any team. He just
Yeah.
doesn't have the role right now in Florida, even though he probably would elsewhere. Like on
Mhm.
the Canucks, he'd probably be like a top six winger. Like
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
he's a quality player. He just doesn't have the role there in Florida. But the pay for Sherratt is just egregious. And
Yes.
the fact that they now only have one second round pick and two thirds over the next 3 years, they went super all in. Giroux, maybe they have plans to re sign him, but it doesn't seem like that's in line with how they've operated the past couple years where they've really bought low on a lot of players and signed to very efficient deals.
Mhm.
Giroux is 34, I think, and so he's not going to be commanding a lot of salary, but he's still an established vet. And depending on how he does in Florida this year, he might be like, "Hey, yeah, I want 3 years at $7 million per."
Mhm.
And does Florida really want to tie up their cap with that if they don't win the cup this year? I don't know. They might be forced to if they don't win or if they bounce out of the first round. Like
Yeah.
the problem for them is the Atlantic is stacked. Like the Eastern playoff bracket this year is going to be loaded. And
Yeah.
so
Tampa
there's going
for
to be no
starters.
easy matchups, right? So it's like getting out of there is going to be a fucking buzzsaw. And so if it doesn't work, they gave up a lot on a bunch of guys who are going to only get older and not really help them down the road. So that's the
Yeah.
only reason why I would have them in my losers. It's not a big loss, but I think it was enough where the overpays made me kind of go, "Ooh, if you don't win this year, like that's gonna hurt pretty bad."
Yeah, it could come back to bite them. And again, like the most of the reason why I predicated them as a winner is because like again, like I'm basing it off of literally the history of that team. First of all, almost never buying players ever. Like they're all they it seems like for the entire history of the Panthers, they're sellers and
Yeah,
they're nowhere near a playoff spot. So, hey, all of a sudden they're in a stacked division and winning it.
yeah,
Like I was
like
kind of like,
dominantly too. Like
you're
not
dominant.
like
They're
lucking into a win, but like they're actually like just
yeah.
tuning everybody.
Yeah, so it's one of those things where it's like, yeah, like for them in particular, like them only, it's one of those cases where it's like, yeah, maybe it is worth it for you to overpay just because of how little success you've had in the playoffs in the past. Maybe this is the year that you finally look at and go, okay, we actually need to try and win more than like a couple games here. We need to
Yeah,
get past the first round and actually do some damage. So that way, when come maybe what come the off season, maybe you don't sign Claude Giroux, but maybe you can convince more players to come to Florida to play on the team because they have now suddenly have like an actual like history of success to build off of.
sure. Yeah.
As for losers in on this side of the thing, I would put Seattle in there as one team. Like they're not my I don't think
Really?
they're the worst one. I put them in there
Well,
just because of all the undos. Like it's such a it's
they're
a, it they lost the expansion draft more
they're
than
50-50,
anything.
right? Because like all this like I think they did really well. They were one of my 3 winners at the trade deadline, but it comes with the big asterisk of like congrats, you sold a bunch of guys you just got for
You
free for a bunch of picks. So you're just prolonging the losing basically,
Yeah, you
which
did yeah, they
kudos, I guess.
yeah,
Like they finally recoup some value, which they failed to do entirely at the expansion draft. Like that's good. They got
yeah,
4 second rounders, 2 thirds, 2 fourths, a sixth, a seventh, and it was all for guys that they had just got in the expansion draft.
yeah.
Like
It's just yeah, and
it's just objectively very funny.
yeah, it's objectively really funny, especially how when you consider like how many of them were moves that they like were literally just a control Z on. Like it wasn't
Hmm.
even like they sent them all to a completely different
No, it was like
location. It was
back to
some
the
of
same teams.
like, oh, it's Marcus Johansson's a Capital again.
Yeah,
Mason Appleton's a Jet again.
yeah,
Jeremy
it's
Lauzon
so
is
funny.
I think Jeremy Lauzon, or he was a Bruin. He was a Bruin this
He's a
whole time.
Bruin. I think he went to Ottawa or something
Nashville.
like that, or
He's a
Nashville. Yeah.
Predator now.
Which is still
Um,
just it does
they
like,
did,
even then, just the fact
yeah,
that a couple of those guys went back to the teams they took them from is just like,
is very funny. Yeah.
well done, guys.
Yeah.
Really bang up job there.
Yeah, you're really like they really like it's one of those things where they lost in proxy based on like the history for me, where it's
Completely.
like, yeah, yeah, this was the right call to, and they got a lot back for guys like Callie Yarncrow and Mark Giordano that are, and that those picks are going to come in handy in the next few years. But it is just really funny how they were like at the beginning of the year, like, yeah, we picked a good team that's going to compete now, and whoops, nope, never mind. They were very, very bad. I guess if I were going to throw another team in there as well, I don't know. I would say the Oilers lost based strictly on the fact that they did not trade for a goaltender, which they really, really
They
needed.
really did, especially
That was
after, signing Harry Sarteri, I think his
yeah.
name was, from
And
the
then
Finnish Liga, and
or
Arizona
that was the
claiming
Leafs.
him.
That was the
Oh, yeah, the
Leafs,
Leafs,
who
yeah, right.
also lost based on that, not
Who
getting a
also lost the
goaltender.
trade deadline purely based off of that, which is
Again,
so
like
funny.
how I get that Yara Halak hasn't had a good year. Like I get that. But how is he not at least somewhat considered somewhat a better option than
It's the
Mike
bonus,
Smith and
man.
Mikko Koskinen?
It's purely that bonus. No
He
one wants to.
makes
No one wants to toll it. No one
but
wants
he
to
makes
take it.
less than them. He makes less than those 2. Like, it's just such a weird,
Well,
like,
I mean,
move.
in the sense, like, if you're the Leafs, though, you
The
just put
league
a
sure.
$4 million goalie on waivers, and you were hoping to get like a league minimum guy from Finland to be your Jack Campbell backup, I guess, and that fell through. So you can't now go and be like, I'm going to get a $1.5 million goaltender who's going to cost me another 1.5 next year, which I don't have. Like they just couldn't do it. The Oilers, on the other hand, it's like they went out and got 3 forwards for the exact same cost as a goaltender like Halak, so it's like, you probably could have done it, especially since, like, I mean, they're on a streak right now, like, they're finally kind of swaying the goalie problem, missed over them, but still, you'd want a bit more security than Mike Smith or Mike Mikko Koskinen, but hey, they have prioritized shoring up forward depth and defensive depth on that team. And if they think that's what's going to help them in playoffs, like
They
Godspeed to them.
Yeah, they've made it very clear that they don't think their goaltending is a problem, even though it 100% is.
Yeah.
And that's their funeral. That is their funeral. I would love it would be hey, look, maybe in 3 months time our predictions on the playoffs will be just as bad as our regular season predictions and we'll be watching Mike Smith lift the Conn Smythe trophy. But like I kind of feel pretty comfortable saying that yeah, that's gonna when you have to go into a 7-game series against good like stiff competition
hmm
with that goaltending tandem, I have a hard time believing, even with Connor McDavid and Leon Draisaitl, that you're going to come out of it the winners.
Yeah, and especially when it's like you could be facing off like LA. Like, could you imagine how bad that would look as if like
Yeah,
you lose to,
yeah,
to like Cal Peterson or
yeah,
whoever it is, like in
yeah.
the
Oh god,
goaltending
yeah,
duel, like how bad that would be?
yeah. Like you lose to like
It was like some
some
kid.
goaltender you could have had, like you could have easily traded for before and just
Yeah.
didn't. Like that would be very interesting. I get like if we were to quickly go over like one or two of the bigger moves that we kind of are just kind
Yeah,
of
let's
out there
let's
in the
let's do one of them, but I gotta go and walk my
yeah.
dog. So let's
Yeah, which
let's
it
get one out of the
what's
way.
yeah, what's nice is they've set this up so that they've set the trade system up to include all major trades and put those in a separate category.
Beauty.
Marc-Andre Fleury is a Minnesota Wild part of the Minnesota Wild now.
Yeah,
Um,
that makes sense. Minnesota needed better goaltending than Capo Kakkonen, and they are obviously in win now mode because you know, they got
they're look
those Parise Suter buyout hits coming in
yeah,
next year and the next 4 years after. So they're trying to win now. I
yeah,
doubt they can win now because like as good as they are, like they're just not Colorado tier.
yeah,
So I
yeah.
mean,
I
it
don't
gets
know if
it gets Fleury out of Chicago, and that rocks. So we'll
yeah.
take it.
Now you could argue in theory that the goaltending matchup between say a Minnesota Colorado actually does now with particularly now with Flurry does swing in their favor, which could make a difference. Because like again, like we talked about with Darcy Kemper and Pavel Francouz, both great goaltenders, just a little bit unlucky on the health side of things. Both have been stayed healthy all year, but or I think Francouz got hurt early on, but it was like but yeah, like, it's one of those things where it's like, you don't know in the long stretch of a playoff push what might happen. And
Mhm.
overall, I would say that Flurry, I don't think it's a crazy thing to suggest that the guy who literally won the Vezina last year is a better goaltender than Darcy Kemper. Like, that's not a crazy thing to
Huge
suggest.
stretch.
So you could argue that the Wild fixed one of the fixed themselves in one of the spots that really could make a key difference. And yeah, like you said, they have that very weird Parise Suter buyout thing that like they're on a cap crunch soon, but not yet. So
Right.
it's like one of those, yeah, you got Krill Kaprizov going at a ridiculous clip. You might as well. You might as
Yeah.
well go and take a shot at it. I thought they would be fine with Cam Talbot, honestly. Overall, like I thought he's done okay. And I
Yeah.
honestly thought if anyone was going to move to make room for Flurry, it would have been Talbot rather than the younger guy,
Right.
who
Yeah,
now
fair
is a
enough.
Shark. Also, yeah, sneaky good for the Sharks. They could have really they need some they could use the extra hands in goal. So like, yeah, good for them.
Yeah, they I mean, as you know, the Sharks have been after a goalie for quite some time now. Kakkonen's probably not the long-term fit, but I mean, it gives them some kind of help in the short term,
Yeah.
which is better than who they had before, which was I think Alexei Melnichuk and or sorry, Zach Sawchenko, I think his name was.
Yep, they had
Some
Zachenko,
kid,
they had Aiden they have Aiden Hill, who
Aiden
I
Hill,
believe is
right? Yeah,
injured, and then James Reimer, who is still there.
who is apparently their goaltender.
And was
Yeah,
good. He was actually
PIL.
okay for them. He was actually been all right for them this year. He hasn't been he's actually been like one of their more solid helper like
Well, they
additions this
were
year.
San Jose was actually looking pretty good to start the year, and then they just like fell off,
Yeah,
which
which
was
was
kind of
you can't
expected.
yeah, you knew it was coming, like for them in particular, but it was like, oh, they actually kind of started off well. Like they might have been it's weird, but overall, like yeah, they're doing some okay things overall.
Yeah.
Interesting trade deadline at the end of the day.
Yeah.
Like
It
we're
was a
more
banger,
interesting than we
as they
thought.
say.
More
Yeah, because
interesting than we thought.
I think some of the big because the big major trades, like the Giroux trade or whatever, the Foley trade, like happened like in the days leading up. I think a lot of people, myself included, were like, nothing's gonna happen on Monday. It's just gonna
Mhm.
be boring. Everyone's scared. Cap is too tight. But no, we saw some three-way deals. We saw some like the most interesting trade for me was the like one of the later ones to come through, which was Florida retaining 50% on Max Domi so Carolina could have him.
That's
Like
right.
like someone they might end up playing in the conference finals, you're gonna retain money so they have better depth? Crazy.
Yeah.
Like, they're playing 7D chess over there while, the Pacific teams are, like, trying to hop checkers right now. Like,
Oh,
it's crazy the difference in what, like, kind of moves these team make over there. Unreal.
or in the case of the Golden Knights, you're playing 4D chess, but you've accidentally now spilled juice on the board, and now you're like, "Oh, shoot," now everything's, like, soggy, and you're
Yeah,
trying
fair
to,
enough.
like, dry it off with a blowtorch or, like, with, like, a blow dryer. You're like, "Oh, you're good, you're okay."
Yeah.
"Evgeny, you're fine." Like
Evgeny, you'll still wave and you'll go to that team, right?
yeah,
You're gonna
they're
save us our cap issues,
yeah,
right?
and if they don't, the board is just now on fire, and they're like, "Shit."
Yeah, well, we
That's
tried.
yeah. Overall, they tried. They sure
They did
tried.
their best. Otherwise, folks, we're gonna wrap it here so I can go walk my puppy who is desperate for a walk right now, and I'll
Little
try and do
Murph.
that soon.
Yeah.
Little Murph, I have been Cody Sievertson. You can follow me at Cody Sievertson on Twitter and my website, ahlnuxharvest.com. I'm kind of at that point where I don't know if I'll ever recap a game before the regular season's over. I'll try, but there's no promises because finding a 4-hour window to write is just not really in the cards these days. But you can see me recapping games on Twitter and my usual Twitter commentary and snark, snide, criticism, and memeage and dreamage. Lachlan, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook at Lock in the Crease. You can find my writing work at CanucksArmy.com. I have an article coming out tomorrow morning about Patrick Alvin's presser and the breaking down what he talked about during it.
Hell yeah.
Check out our Patreon, patreon.com/CreaseCast, $1 and $5 tiers. We were working on some Patreon ideas when I was over on Saturday. I believe we
Weird.
haven't. I believe we have
We
Roxy
have
wants to do a movie podcast, so we
Roxy
gotta
wants a movie podcast. Cody wants some Simpson review podcast. So
yes,
we got some ideas in the works that
yes,
have absolutely nothing to do with hockey. So it'll be great.
yeah,
So you can
and we
stay
have
tuned for those concepts coming to the fold.
and we have a YouTube channel. Go check out our YouTube channel if you like the audio versions of the show. Go check that out.
Yes.
Subscribe. Let's try and get to 50 subscribers on the YouTube channel before the
Yeah.
end of
Ding
the
that
season.
bell.
Ding that
Ding
bell.
that
Hit
bell,
that bell.
folks. It
Punch
takes 2
that
seconds.
bell.
You don't
Smash
even,
that like button.
it doesn't send you a text message, so you don't have to worry about the
No.
notification.
But
It's super easy.
it can if you hit the bell. That's the other thing. If you can
But
choose.
you can choose. So that's
You
that's
have
what's
the
essential.
choice. You have the power to make that decision. Isn't that
Yeah.
great?
That sounds very efficient, and that's why I'm going to subscribe right now. So
Wait,
follow me, follow my lead, folks. No,
were you not subscribed before?
I was subscribed before. Don't worry.
I was about to say I might have to fire you now.
I blocked the YouTube channel.
You blocked it.
Yeah, I was like, I don't need this crap. I already hate listening to myself.
Yeah.
Otherwise, folks, we'll catch you on the next episode. I'll hopefully be on next Monday, depending on how the dog life goes. Till then, folks, we love having you guys. Make sure to drop a 5-star review if you can. We appreciate it. Till next time, folks. Bye.
Bye.